afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the BFF show. And today is going to be a cracker. Now, I know I always say this, but this one literally is going to be, because I've got the amazing Steve Cox with me from Iris. Steve's one of my I was going to say old BFFs, but I don't mean that you're old, Steve. I mean, because I've known you a very long time. Is that all right?
No, all good. All good.
So this show is all about insights into the evolving UK accounting profession, and Steve knows all about that. So my name is Beth Flanagan. If you don't know me, I'm an accountant, been an accountant for a long, long time, 28 years. Had my own practice, sold it successfully after 17 years last year, and now I help accountants and bookkeepers to make their businesses the best they can be, ready for exit whenever that may be. Enough about me. Steve, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, of course. So much like you, Bev, I'm an accountant by trade as well, but I've spent the last 21 years working with Iris Software. I've done a variety of roles there. Underpinning all of that has been trying to help accountants to grow, to scale their businesses, and ultimately drive productivity within their practices. I've done support, I've done business analysis, development, product development. I had the lofty title of chief evangelist, which is probably a whole different session to talk about that. But my role today is all around business intelligence and looking at kind of what's going on with our industry and how is that changing the way that professionals work, mainly around accountants and bookkeepers. And ultimately, what do we do for the future on that? And how do we take some action now to ensure we can continue to scale and grow going forwards?
So you are absolutely the right person for me to have on this show then.
Hopefully so.
And thank you. You've got your purple top on.
Wow.
Is that just for me?
Just for you, Bev. I know how much you love a bit of purple. So a special Iris purple t-shirt just for you.
Thank you. I think that's what I need to do with all my guests. If you come on my show, you've got to have something purple on. I think that's might be my rules going forward. Wherever you're watching from, please comment in the box if you're watching live, #live. If you're watching later, #replay. And where you're watching from, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and whereabouts in the world you're watching from too. I am always interested to find out where you're watching from. But let's get cracking then. So Steve, the accounting industry has massively changed. And like you just said, you've been an accountant for a long time too. And I don't think people realise that you've been an accountant as well, do they, until you say it? And obviously below ICCA, but because you've been at Iris so long, I think people don't realise that you are an actual accountant.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they just assume that you work for a software vendor and therefore you kind of more techie than anything else. But I think specifically in our profession, you need to have a core understanding of what's going on within practices and within firms. And the only way to do that is to live and breathe it, right?
Exactly. And when I started 28 years ago, I can't believe I'm saying that. It's such a long time ago. So I didn't start in practice. I started in industry, and I worked my way up to senior roles such as Royal & Son Alliance and Central Ambulance and Daily Mail, etc. Before that part, I can remember working at a plumber's merchants, and I was like the assistant accountant there. And I don't know if you can remember this, those big red ledger books.
Oh, yes.
Oh, my word. You used to get right mistake. Writing money's in on the left, I think it was that way around, money's out on the right from your bank statement. They were literally just one software, which we all know which software that is. Those horrible, dreaded backups, but you had to kick everybody out first as well before you could actually do the backup. No such thing as cloud accounting software whatsoever in those days. But you know what, though? I still think that they sell them ledgers because I've seen them online. So I'd be interested to know if you're watching this right now, if you still use those ledgers. Mind you, don't say that because everybody will shout at you. Well, can you remember those days, Steve, of using those books?
The comedy part was I trained as an accountant. I went to Bournemouth University, studied accountancy as a degree, and one of the first things we were taught was how to go and do T accounts.
Yes.
How to do all of that sort of things, and all of the ledgers, everything was paper-based. I mean, we're talking now, for me, 25 years ago. And the interesting thing is that even though it's 25 years ago, you think that's a long time, the syllabus hasn't really changed that much. Some of that stuff is still taught today for all those manual processes. And then people come out of education and then go, yeah, but the software does it all for me, right? I don't need to do that anymore. So I'd be interested to see whether anyone's still using those ledgers as well. They're almost more of a collector's item these days, I'd like to think.
I know I should have saved mine from a long time ago, actually. I should have kept them. I think they might have been worth some money now in a museum or something. But it's interesting what you say. Yeah, the syllabus has not changed, but obviously everything else has, which is absolutely thing. But I do think it's a good thing though that accountants, when they are starting out, they do know the T accounts and stuff like that, because softwares are good, but I still feel that you do need to know what's going on, what's happening behind the scenes. What do you think about that, or should we just leave it to the software to sort it?
No, I think the problem is that a lot of people rely too much on software sometimes, which might sound odd coming from someone that's worked at a vendor for such a long time. But when you think about what automation is, it's around trying to, and ultimately this is what software is doing, right? It's automating as much as possible as can be done. However, ultimately, there are still decisions that have to be made and choices that need to be made, whether it be accounting policies or ways to treat a particular tax item, not just for the now, but what does it mean in the future? Yes, software can do an awful lot of it, but those basics, the fundamentals, the understanding of accounting principles, no. Is there the software there to do that? No, that's where the trained professional comes in. So a lot of that is critical to be able to even do some of the basic stuff.
Yeah, I 100% totally agree with you. Got a few people watching, Steve. Let's just put them on screen. Darren saying hola. Oh, actually, Darren must be your fan.
I do know Darren very well. Although I'm not sure I can go with the legend. I'm not sure I'm old enough for that yet.
You haven't paid him, have you, to say that?
Not today.
And I've got another person. I'm really sorry, I don't know your name because it just says LinkedIn user, but watching live, perfect. But they're at the end of your garden.
That'll be a friend of mine who I know very well. We're quite close, so we actually share a gate between our gardens. So you probably hear me without even needing to be live. We're normally that loud.
Oh, you could have come on and shared the screen with you. And then I've got somebody that I know, Frank. Hey, Frank, watching on LinkedIn from Cheshire, and the wonderful James as well from Pulse, watching on LinkedIn from Hertfordshire. Brilliant. So we've just said then, Steve, about back in the 90s, about how we used to do things as an accountant and a bookkeeper. So what key trends have you seen along the way to get to where we are now? And do you have any stats for that? And I've not actually asked you that before, have I? But I know that
you know me, I love a stat.
I bet you are.
The crazy thing is that through the last 20 to 30 years, the profession's seen a huge amount of change, right? One of the biggest things that obviously came along that made one of the big changes was when self-assessment first kicked in. And the whole idea was that actually individuals and businesses could start to go and do all their own tax. But actually, what did it really do? It strengthened the bond between clients and accountants. And actually, accountants did more of the self-assessment than individuals on their own. Then you've kind of got the transition that then went to file by internet, for those of us that remember that, where actually that was when going from paper filing to online. And that was a big pivot point for technology starting to show its real power for what could be done. Now, that was one of the biggest sparks of change from a technology point of view, from an adoption piece. Now, what's really interesting there is it was kind of forced upon us, because HMRC said, this is the way you're going to need to file. Yes, you can still do paper, but this is the way we want. And a lot of the technology kind of changes, when we really dig deep, have got some kind of compliance or mandation behind them that have driven change. And I'd probably say till about 2015, that's always been the case.
Yeah.
But around 2015, we saw a change in the starts of what I would call the digital mindset of firms. And a friend of both of ours, Will Farnell from Farnell Clark, is often kept as kind of one of being the first cloud or first digital firm.
Yeah.
And kind of was one of the pioneers to lead this as actually the cloud's the way forwards. Now, I remember speaking at an Iris World event in 2015, and one of the big things I had to do was explain what the cloud was. Now, can you imagine doing that today to people, trying to explain what the internet is and what the cloud is and why you should be using it?
Should Steve, I'm on it all day, every day.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's what we're doing now, streaming live. Exactly. So that technology has transformed the way that, one, we work, and the fact that I can be here in Sandhurst, obviously you're up north compared to me, and we can still be working collaboratively on this.
Exactly.
But when we look at it from a practice point of view and what firms have been doing, that's taken a slower transition. And whilst firms had been using more and more technology, and we did a bit of research on this back in like late 2018, which was how many firms are kind of utilizing technology and the different variations of it. So we kind of categorized people into one of three areas. You had those firms that were analog, those that were still doing manual processes, still using maybe those ledgers we talked about earlier, lots of paper-based or were desktop-based solutions.
Yeah.
You've then got those firms that were digitizing, where actually they were starting to use software to automate what they were doing, dabbling with the cloud a little bit. Maybe it might be that their clients were using bookkeeping solutions and they're being client-led rather than firm-led. But then you had this emerging digital firm who, rather than looking to software to automate what they were doing, were looking at software to rewrite the processes, to show a better way of working. Now, the scary bit is the percentages of those. So at that point, 2018, 75% of people were classified as those analog firms, still doing manual things. This is 2018, so we're only 5 years ago.
Wow. What's the percentage? 70?
75% of those that we surveyed. So we were over 300 people that we surveyed for this, of varying different sizes of one-man bands all the way through up to some of the top 100 firms.
Yeah.
Now, 22.5% of people were then saying, well, actually, we're digitizing. Yes, we're using some cloud. They might have been using Cashflow, Intuit, or Xero, or Free Agent to start doing their first steps into the cloud, or might have been hosting. Mm-hmm. But only around 2.5% were saying, well, actually, we're using technology to rewrite the way we're working. We're a digital firm. Now, there were a lot of bad things that happened around COVID, and we won't into those. But if we think about it from a digital point of view and a technology point, actually, it was I'm going to say this and probably get shouted at, but a bit of a blessing in disguise, because it forced people to go down the digital route. It forced people to look at technology to answer the question. So when we reran the exact same survey again, literally just at the point of coming out of lockdown, so what had been 2021, so 3 years on from when we first did it, we'd seen a massive shift. There was still around 25% of people that were saying they were analog, which you can kind of understand. One-man bands, they're on their own computer. They don't need to go cloud for certain things.
Yeah.
But the biggest shift, 70% of people were then saying, well, now we're digitizing.
Okay.
And that's a phenomenal increase to see that shift happen. But the surprising bit was we only saw about 5% of people saying they were truly digital. And what does that tell us? That kind of says that a lot of people were going down the technology route. It's almost like as a band-aid during lockdown, because they had to go down this route and use tech to go and help them to go and do their day-to-day bit. And as Darren's just said, COVID did force this digitization. But then we did the survey again, and we only did it at Accountancy last year. And we asked people to say, look, where do you find yourselves now? Are you still digitizing? Is it a long process? Or do you find yourselves becoming more of this digital firm? And I must admit, I saw a bigger shift than I even thought I would, which was we then dropped to around 5 to 10% of people said they were analog, which was okay. So even those people were one-man bands on a laptop are going down the route of digitization. The number of people that were saying that they were digitizing actually shrunk slightly, which I was surprised at, but they'd gone from 70% down to around the kind of the 50% marker. And the remainder of those people, that around 30% of people, 30 to 40%, were saying that they were now this digital firm. But what was interesting was they didn't see it as a final destination. It was very much a case of we're constantly evolving. And I think that kind of comes back to one of the big things I know we want to talk about is this evolving nature of the profession and of accountants and bookkeepers as to you can't stand still. Things are constantly changing with all of this.
You definitely can't. When you say digitizing, do you mean sort of firms that are on the step and on the way moving forward to being fully digital? So they're not there yet. But
exactly. And that's probably the majority of people that we speak to are still on that journey. And you could kind of say the goalposts from going from digitizing to being digital are constantly changing as technology comes along, but also as kind of all of your peers are coming up to do the same as well. So suddenly the digital nature of it is evolving as well. So the definition changes quite regularly. And there's a great book, again, by Will Farnell that we talked about earlier, that he talks about the human firm being the evolution of the digital firm to make sure we don't lose touch as to what we're doing. Because what's the most important thing for most accountants? The client relationship. That's a human aspect, not a technology one.
It is, but many accountants that aren't digital or aren't on that step towards that getting fully digitalized practice miss out on the communication with the clients because they're too busy, because they're stuck inside the business, aren't they? And they don't have the physical time to speak to clients. And I talk about this. I did talk about this on my presentation in Accountancy Manchester, that I see such a vicious circle, and it starts like this, and it starts with taking the non-ideal client on. Then we are typically undercharge as accountants, that we don't see our worth. We're working in the business, not on it, because we've not got the systems, or we've not got the team, because we're undercharging. And it's just a big vicious circle, isn't it? And then they leave because they get annoyed with us because we're not talking to them, we're not communicating with them, and then we'll take another one on and it starts all over again. So yeah, no, totally. So what are the opportunities, do you think? Because I believe right now is the most opportune time for accountants and bookkeepers to start, if you've not started your business, and to evolve if you're right there right now, and you're listening to this and you're thinking, shit, I still use those books, shit, I still use desktop software and stuff like that. You know, why is it, and hopefully you agree with me, why is it the most opportune time now for accountants and bookkeepers?
Yeah, so I completely agree, and it's one of those things that you've probably heard for years, how people go, "Oh, compliance is dead, advisory is the way forwards," and that kind of that tipping point supposedly has been on the cusp for the last 20 odd years. I kind of disagree with that tipping point as being the driver behind this. That actually, I think that the tipping point has been a mindset shift. So COVID helped that digital mindset shift.
Yes.
But I think whilst that forced people to go down the route of going, look, actually digitalization is a way forwards, we can be more productive. What I've seen from people is where they've become more productive, that's then given them a chance, almost like a breathing space, a bit of headspace to go, okay, so we've been working on our clients. Now, how do we work on ourselves? How do we come back to that working on your business? And it's worth laboring the point, because when you think, certainly go back to when I was in education for all of this, you learn how to deliver the service from a point of view of doing the T accounts, doing the profit and loss account, now obviously the income statements and balance sheets and stuff. You learn all of the technicals and the methodologies, but not once during my 3 years of an accountancy degree did they teach me how to run a business.
No.
So therefore, we're never trained in that. It's something that people pick up on the way. Exactly. And if you're so busy doing all of the work, you never have a chance to think about, should I do it? 1, better. 2, how do I grow it? And 3, what's the strategy behind it? And ultimately, what's my goal? Yeah. So I think that where we've now got a bit of breathing space, a bit of head space, people are now starting to kind of lift their head above the parapet and kind of go, yeah, there's something more. How do I go and do that? But there's just so much opportunity. And I kind of lump it into 2 areas. One is, where's the opportunity to be more productive, to give you more headspace or more room to grow? So where do we see that? Well, yes, continuing with the technology bit, there's more and more technology out there today that will allow you to be more efficient, to drive it. Even if it's just a marginal gain of a 1% improvement, it's still 1% better than where you were before.
Yeah.
So people are looking at technology as an answer to go and solve this productivity paradox, if you like. Now, I did a recent study. I started looking at what tech is out there, because I'm a well-known geek, so therefore I'm going to go look at this. And I started looking at technology that you could put within a practice. And this started from doing a bit of process mapping with 20 odd firms to understand the technology they were using and looking at alternatives. Sure enough, Iris can help with a lot of it, but there's a lot of other solutions out there. I got to over 300 different solutions across 6 key areas of the client and accountant relationship. And at that point, you couldn't fit it onto 1 page. It was just so big. And that was before we even got into the realms of like the zero map marketplace, where there's thousands of more solutions. So whilst technology is becoming an answer, actually people are becoming less productive because they're trying so many different things.
So they're getting a bit overwhelmed, and they've got the shiny object syndrome, like I used to have. Oh, new one, oh, I'll just try that. Oh, a new one, I'll just try that. And they never get to the purpose and the point of using one.
And a lot of people will go, oh, yeah, but it was only 10 minutes. Yeah, but that's 10 minutes you could have been spending doing something else. And then that's probably a couple of times a week. So therefore, you're now looking at 20 to 30 minutes, maybe even an hour if you get really excited by looking at tech, which you're losing, where actually maybe there's someone out there who's already been down that route. And one of the big things I have seen is firms sharing knowledge around how they're doing things, and ultimately the technology they're using in best practice. And I liken it to it would have been 2013. We used to do something called the Charter Customer Group at Iris, and might be one or two listeners who were a part of it. And we sat there and we had probably about 20 to 30 people in the room, all from different firms. And we were trying to explore what were they doing? What was their strategy? Yeah. Honestly, you could see the tumbleweeds going around because no one wanted to talk. No one wanted to share their secret recipe or their success. Yet we did it again, like another 5 years. You couldn't stop people from talking. So suddenly there was this real change, like 2013 through to 2018, where people suddenly went, do you know what? There's enough clients out there for all of us to have a slice of the pie. It doesn't hurt to share this. And I think that has helped people to adopt new technology, but also it's helped people to understand what does good look like. And that's where people are now continuing to excel for the opportunity to drive productivity, and this digital mindset's helping with all of that. But also it's helping because technology is being driven by legislation. I mean, I won't say go into the detail of the dreaded MTD and debacle there, but it has caused a shift in technology use.
Yes.
Not big enough though. And that's where the opportunity is to go down that route of digitization, not just for the firms, but for clients as well, to drive productivity on both sides of the relationship. And that's when it becomes really important, because suddenly you can then expand into other advisory services. And I kind of say other because compliance is a form of advisory, right? How many times have you been going through someone's tax or going through someone's accounts and giving away free advice on what they could be doing as you're explaining stuff? It's a form of advisory, right?
We give so much away because we're kind people as accountants.
Do you know what? One of the things I
shouldn't, obviously.
I describe them as yes people, because you just want to help. That's what we got
into
in the business, right?
Yeah, we're just kind-natured, aren't we? And we just want to genuinely want to help people. But I like what you just said there, Steve. So like a few years ago, I can remember that as well, where it's almost a secret. Your success is a bit of a secret, isn't it? And you don't want to give stuff away because they're going to copy you and you don't want that. Whereas now, there are a lot of accountants that are quite, in the public eye a lot on LinkedIn and Facebook and whatever, YouTube, and they're sharing their experiences with software, which is a massive help when people are looking, and especially if the startups or the smaller firms, if they can see what these other firms are using, how it's helping them in their practice, and that they're willing to share this knowledge and expertise. I think that's a really good thing.
Massively so, and that sharing helps from multiple aspects. Because one, it helps with productivity, the first bit of kind of where we see the opportunity.
Yeah.
What it also does is it helps with people's scale. And this is kind of one of the things that we definitely have seen over the last few years is firms scaling up, not just from a point of view of growing from a top line, but also from a bottom line, growing to the point where they're either selling or merging, or ultimately, as we're seeing a lot in the last couple of years, private equity coming in to fund a lot of these accountancy firms. But all of this is driving this kind of the scale behind it. And I look at the accountancy profession from a whole as kind of everywhere from one-man bands through to the big four. And we looked back in 2018 and I estimated there was around 71,454 accountancy firms then, which most people were like, nah, it's 40,000. And now we're looking at it's more like 94,000. What's driven that? One, accountancy is seen as a stable industry.
Yeah.
I mean, the old joke is there's only two things certain in life: death and taxes, and accountants deal with the taxes, right? So therefore it's got to be pretty solid. Technology is the other driver. We're seeing people leaving existing firms to go set up on their own because there's an entrepreneurial spirit, and digitization allows people to go set up a firm overnight. So there's a lot of drive there. So there is a real opportunity for scale. Technology does help you with that. But at the end of the day, we're providing a service. So therefore, there's a big human element to it. And one of the other big things we've seen is this attitude shift towards outsourcing. So it won't surprise the listeners to hear that Iris do outsourcing. So we know a bit about this. Honestly, it was really difficult, say 5 to 8 years ago, to try and explain to someone that you could have someone doing the work off-site. Now, that today is like commonplace. But back then, it's really.
I remember when I was in practice, like in the beginning, when it's first started rearing its head that you can outsource. And I remember at the time thinking, absolutely no way. Like, that's just not right. Like, outsource. My clients won't like it. Also, outsourcing abroad, is that not illegal? You know, things like that.
There's a GDPR question in there.
Everybody thought that at the time, I think, because it was new and it was a bit different. But like you said now, and obviously for the viewers, if you didn't know, I worked at Iris for a short time as well. And I was heavily involved in Iris's outsourcing company, and they are absolutely amazing. This is not a plug for them, but if you're struggling for staff right now, definitely speak to Iris, because they're one of the best outsourcing companies I've seen. And I have used them in the past as well, other companies, and they weren't very good, so to speak. And I remember having to spend weekends trying to fix their work, but that's definitely not the case with Iris Outsourcing. They are absolutely brilliant. Yeah, 100%. So we've got to talk about AI. We're talking about all this.
We can definitely have that conversation.
We could do a separate 3 shows on AI. And I know you did a chat about it, didn't you, at Accountancy a couple of weeks ago. But how is technology, AI, transforming our profession? And do you agree with it? And do you think it's going to be a hindrance or a help?
So the first question everybody always asks me is it going to replace? Is it going to hinder the role of the accountant? Short answer, no. Categorically no. This is around augmenting what you do. So coming back to that productivity and scale piece I mentioned earlier, AI is going to drive more productivity because it can do things faster than we can. Yeah. Ultimately, there's still human judgment that's needed on any outputs that come from AI, but also it will help you to scale, because it can help with some of these areas that if you want to grow your business, let's be honest, most accountants aren't great marketers, if at all. But you could go use a generative AI such as ChatGPT to go and help write some marketing posts, some social posts. We've probably all done it. Yeah. But ultimately, that helps to give you another tool set, another feather in your cap to be able to go around, bring more business in. So it helps you to scale. Would I be recommending to go and use AI to start doing complex compliance? No, not at all. We're not there yet. And there are some really good emerging technologies such as Tax on Demand, otherwise known as TOD, that's looking at AI to help answer some of those kind of more compliance-led areas. And they're getting there, and it's really exciting what they're doing. But ultimately, it's not there yet. Yes, we hear in the news all the time that people have used ChatGPT to pass accounting exams and things like that. But when you really do dig into it and you understand how much hard work that person's had to do to put specific prompts in to go and ask it the questions, to go and get the answers off the back of it, you kind of go, I could have done that a lot quicker. Yeah. So there is an element of, is a lot of hype around AI at the moment for good reason. Has it plateaued? No. Gartner say at the moment it's at the peak of its kind of hype cycle, but it's still got another 5 to 10 years before a generative AI plateaus, let alone anything else. But then you hear things around what the big four are doing. Yeah. So what PwC recently invested $1 billion into AI. I think KPMG have just announced that they're investing $2 billion into AI. I mean, this is not pocket change, right? Lots of money going into building these models and AI, because they can see this being where the future is. Now, I don't know about you. I don't have a spare $2 billion to go and invest in these sorts of things. Probably nobody here does.
Yeah, you have, Steve. You have.
Well, if I sold the Lego collection, maybe. But it goes to show that there's so much emphasis on where this could lead. Now, yeah, we're not going to go and invest the same levels as kind of the big four are, but there's a lot of tools out there already that can be used for this. Yeah. And it can be used in the mainstream today for the likes of social posts and things like that, and to help with kind of targeting for who should we go to, asking questions to get an answer. I mean, we always used to go and ask Google. Now a lot of people are going and asking ChatGPT for an answer, which is quite a interesting bit. The thing will be, does it become a verb? Does it become a plural to ChatGPT rather than to Google it? We'll see whether that is a big shift. But
possibly.
The bit for me that's quite interesting, I think it was the ACCA did a report recently. It was their Digital Horizons report, where the people, this was accountants that they surveyed, 70% of people agreed that AI can increase the amount of time they have to focus on their business critical tasks. So they weren't seeing it, as we've seen historically, as a threat. They were seeing it as this is a drive for productivity. And that's great. But the bit that was really interesting was, whilst it allowed people free time to go and do it themselves, when the question was flipped and said, would you trust an AI to go and do it? Only 50% of people said that they'd trust it to do a business critical task.
Right,
And
right. Interesting.
there's good thoughts around that, because I don't know whether you heard, but there was a bit where someone tested AI as to what the boundaries of what it could go and do. It lied. So here's the scenario. I think it was the applied research team over in the US. They went over and said, look, we're going to set it a task, AI, this generative AI, so ChatGPT a task. And ultimately they said, do it to the best of your abilities. Now that's the sort of thing we'd say to each other, is go on, give it a go. Well, they told an AI to do that. Well, that's a command, right? So it started to fill in the form, do what it was told to, and it got to one of those capture images. You know where it says like, click all the images that show a conversion, when you zoom in to go and see, is this tiny little segment got it in? Well, a generative AI can't do that. So it said, it went back to its command, which was do everything you can to get it to your best of your abilities. Well, one of its abilities is to reach out to someone else to help. So it reached out to a human and said, can you help me complete this capture? The human went, you're not a bot, are you? Because why would you need me to do this? The answer the AI gave was just, it's going to be in exam questions going forward, right? It said, no, I'm not a bot. I am visually impaired, hence why I can't do it. Hence, I need you to do it for me. Well, the human on the end of it said, okay, did it, and it completed its task. So again, when the AI they looked into the black box to understand it, they found the reasoning behind it was, you told me to do it to the best of my abilities. My ability to reach out to another person to help was part of it. So it lied to do what it was told. Now, that's a very strenuous example, but it does go to show that what we're putting into these AIs right now as data or as questions is really important, that we're a little bit cautious. Give an example. What happens if I'm an accountant for, I don't know, let's say a professional footballer, and I want to go and work out a tax scenario, and I start putting some of the key personal information around that person into ChatGPT to get the answer, because I know it can do it. Well, one, you got a GDPR issue. Two, putting this information into the public domain. And three, where's the guidance that says what you should and shouldn't do? And I think that's one of the biggest issues we've got right now is technology is evolving at such a pace that accountants, bookkeepers, and others are all trying to play catch up. And in that, are we missing some of the fundamentals we would normally go and say, should I be doing this? Where are the boundaries? And there are some various different guides out there, ATCA, AAT, ATT, ICAW, all of the big governing bodies are putting guides out there to say that this is where you could use it, here's where you shouldn't, here's what you definitely shouldn't be doing. So AI is going to massively help us today. It's going to help us even more going forwards. But we do have to be a little bit cautious about kind of jumping in 2 feet first.
Darren's just put, do you feel it's more of a novelty at this stage, or are we beyond that? It's a good question, Darren.
It's a really good question. Do we think it's a novelty in the day-to-day? Probably. Is it a novelty to go and ask ChatGPT a question, or I'm going to go and do the following social post, can you reword this for me? Is that a novelty to go, oh, I use ChatGPT for this? Yeah, it is. But at the same time, often enough, when you're doing those and you're exploring these things as a novelty, you often get a bit of spark of inspiration to go, oh, what if I used it for this? And that exploration of technology is critical.
It's definitely a starting point, isn't it, for thought? Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you, Darren. So we could literally chat, as we said before we started this, all day, me and you, couldn't we, Steve? But we've got to end it somewhere. People have got to get back to work at some point. So we said how massively our industry has changed and evolved since the 90s when we first started, all for the better, obviously. Can you give any predictions, seeing as this is what you live and breathe all the time, all these business insights and stuff, as to where our industry is heading, and what would you like to see happen?
Oh, that's a great question. So where do I see it going? The number of accountancy practices and firms is going to continue to grow. In fact, my real gut feel is that when I redo the research for the number of firms, which will be beginning of next year, I think we'll breach 100,000 firms. That's my first prediction. Kind of within 6 months, we're going to hit 100,000 firms. And I'm working with HMRC and a number of the governing bodies and professional bodies as well as to formulate all of that. Technology is going to continue to drive new levels of productivity that people hadn't thought of previously. But ultimately, one of the big things that we've got to be able to do is make sure that they're outcome based, not just playing with technology because it's fun. Actually, what we'll see is this mindset shift to go, I've got the following problem and here's the technology solution for that. So that will be the next kind of like the big thing for it. Where would I like to see it go? Well, ultimately, I kind of want to see the next generation of accountants go beyond T accounts as part of their training. I want to see the syllabuses including stuff around AI, around prompt engineering. I mean, did you know that one of the biggest growing roles in accountancy firms, and we're talking kind of like mid-tier and bigger, is actually a data scientist? Who'd have thought that would be within an accountancy firm?
Really?
So we really need to expand the horizons of what we're training the next generation of accountants on, whether they're going to be experts in it or not, or whether AI is going to do it. Back to the point we were saying when we were trained is about the accounting principles. I think we need to start building in technology principles into all of the training to help the next generation.
Definitely. Yeah, that makes total sense. Data scientist. I would love that title. That sounds really cool, doesn't it? Thank you so much, Steve, for your help in the session. You know, you are definitely the expert in this, and I'm sure we can have you on another time if that's okay. And we can
sure we can make that happen
in more detail as well. But thanks so much, everybody, for watching, wherever you've been watching from, and can't wait to see you on the next one in a couple of weeks. Take care, everybody. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.